think it's Eve. Welcome all. So we are excited to be here. Today is January 9th, 2024. So we are 9 days into 2024, guys. I know I'm trying to do my math here. I'm not that good with math, but I do my best. We have on the show tonight, or today, this morning, my good friend, Mr. Barry Habib, CEO of MBS Highway. How you doing, Bear?
I'm doing great. Yeah, 9 days in already.
9 days in. Now, Bear, I was going through your bio this year, and every year your bio gets longer and longer with more and more accolades, man. It's just amazing what you're doing out there in the world. It's just powerful, man. It's so powerful.
Well, thank you, buddy. I try and do some. I try and do some good things out there.
Yeah, I mean, I got on you. I know that you did the best-selling author for Money in the Streets. You got the 3-time Crystal Ball Award by Zillow and Pulsenomics for the most accurate real estate forecast.
Well, I'm trying to get a fourth one. Our forecast for this year for 6.8% might come in right on the nose for real estate value. So we're hoping.
Wow, man! Congratulations, man. It's so good stuff there, man. So, anything going on interesting in the market, Bear?
Yeah, there's a lot. We just came out with a forecast, and our forecast basically breaks it down to supply and demand in every different area. Whether it be where interest rates are headed, it's going to be the supply of paper that's coming out on the market versus can we sop it up, and what's going to be the demand for that. What are the Fed's reactions going to be to inflation? How are we going to handle the situation as the reverse repos drain down, and what are we going to do with quantitative tightening? And of course, real estate. Real estate's all about supply and demand. So lots going on. It's going to be an interesting year, but I think it's going to be overall a much better year. We see real estate volume of transactions increasing 15 to 20%. So that should be helpful. I mean, this is albeit from low levels, but it should be helpful. And I do think that there's hopes for rates to be significantly better than what we've seen in 2023.
Yeah.
But it'll be very much dependent on where both inflation goes and what happens with quantitative tightening.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm hearing rate cuts from the Fed from anywhere from 3 times a year this year to 6 times this year. You know what I mean?
So the Fed is in their dot plots. They are mostly, not everyone. There's 19 Fed members. 2 of the Fed members said no rate cuts. Although one of them, I'm sure, is Michelle Bowman, who yesterday just said, "Hey, our thought process is evolving." She was talking about rate hikes, so she might come around a little bit more. But there's one Fed member that sees 6 Fed rate cuts. There are the majority of them between 2 and 4 rate cuts. So the mean forecast is for 3 Fed rate cuts, but the market is handicapping a little bit more. The market, the handicaps fluctuate. So currently, it was 6 quarter-point cuts or 150 basis points worth, but currently it is 125 basis points. That is the current market forecast. And that was after Friday's jobs number, which was really probably just a BS number, it's a bullshit number.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I've heard other people say the same thing. Like, they're not believing this jobs report that comes out recently on the last few times. What is that about?
Well, if you take a look at the way that the mechanism for the jobs numbers come out, it is a Herculean task with 168 million roughly people in the labor force to try and figure out how many jobs were lost and created and come up with a net number every month. It's difficult. So you have to rely a lot on modeling. And that modeling is very flawed and very faulty. One of the big so if you take a look at the way that it's constructed, we'll get a little wonky quickly here. So there's the business survey, and then there's the household survey. So the business survey, they survey businesses. So the business survey, you split it in 2. They take 125,000 large companies, and those large companies, they get a very poor response rate, less than 40%. So now you got less than 50,000 companies that will tell you the amount of job gains versus loss. Now, that's valuable information. But then the other half of it is called the birth-death model. This is where they get medium and small-sized businesses to tell you how much. Now, they're not going to survey the owner of a delicatessen, okay? But what they are going to do is they're going to take a look at something called the birth-death model. How many businesses were born and how many businesses closed during a month. Then they have to do guesswork. How many people do we think worked at that business?
Mm.
So it is a very flawed methodology, and that's why there are so many revisions. Now, that's half the survey. The other half of the survey is called the household survey. So they actually call people. They call about 60,000 people. They don't get full responses. They get another, maybe half of them respond. So again, it is a limited amount. But of those people that respond, they ask them if they're working during the period. And this is where they try and determine how many people are working and the rate of unemployment. So the rate of unemployment is based upon how many unemployed people, and you divide that into the labor force. But if you haven't looked for a job for the last 4 weeks, they eliminate you. So if you're
Yeah.
unemployed for longer than 4 weeks and you stop looking for whatever reason, you're no longer counted as unemployed. So it's really flawed because there's a lot of people that fall into that category. That's picked up in something called the U6 number, which is the overall unemployment number, and that was 7.1%. So a very different story there than the
Mm. Is
3.7%.
there a better methodology that you've seen that you would say,
ADP is better. ADP
okay,
is better. They take 20 million records, but they follow 10 million of where they could take the same employee and track them over time. And they're good at wage gains. They are reasonably good at job creations because not everyone is on ADP, but it's a good sampling. It is a healthy sampling, so you can pick up some good data there. Look, bottom line, Bobby, is we have seen revisions to the headline number. So the headline number comes out, it's great, this and that. Oh my gosh, look at how many
yeah,
jobs are created. Economy's great. You get
yeah,
the employment secretary come out and the administration takes a victory lap. But do you know that 11 of the last 12 were revised significantly lower to the tune of on average 40,000 a month. And if you take out government jobs, which is a bullshit calculation,
mm,
it is 12 of 12 revisions lower. And the government doesn't even bother to be like cute about their bullshit that they put out there. The last few months, they 51,000, 51,000. It's just like, let's plug this in for what it is, regardless of what reality is. So, and those are not cyclical changes. If the economy is declining, you're not going to see less or more government workers. You want to look at what's happening in the private sector. And the private sector is not as strong, nowhere near as strong as these numbers would indicate.
yeah,
And then the other aspects of it that you have to take into consideration is that it's not only just the job creations, but hours worked. Hours worked now is at the lowest level since 2020. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's equivalent to like 2.5 million jobs worth. There's only 34.3 hours worked a week. That's a half an hour less. It's like 2.5 million jobs lost over the year. So, look, the jobs picture is not bad, but it's not where you would go out and celebrate this. You seeing
yeah.
all of these downward revisions. It's to me, it seems like the employment picture has a trend of less and less and less jobs being created. And don't forget, Fabi, that you can't go by the initial jobless claims, which are very low. But a few problems with that is that, if I'm paying a headhunter to hire somebody, or if I had a hard time hiring somebody over the last couple of years, I might be a little bit more reluctant to let that individual
Mm,
go just quickly. So
yeah,
the first step is, hiring slow, and then you see, well, the first thing really is job posting slow, which we've seen, then hiring slow, which we're seeing, and then eventually people get let go. So we'll
yeah.
get there.
So one thing I was going to actually start off with, we kind of took this other highway, to quote your MBS highway, right? I want to kind of dive into MBS highway a little bit because I've been using MBS highway a lot more than I had in the several years, right? And I love what you've done with it, by the way, right? So I want to know something, Bear. Like, I remember years ago when I first met you, like, I don't even remember this, 2002, right? You were big on the 25-day moving average as the leash of the bond market for the MBSs, right? Is that still true today? Because I'm looking at that rate, and it seems like with the last couple of days, we were right about that 25-day moving average.
Yeah, we've danced on it the last 7 days. Well, I mean, that's one of the components. Maybe we just happen to be talking about it on that day, but
Yeah,
the reason why you call it there's something called the leash effect. If pricing gets too far above or below it, it tends to be snapped back on as if it was a leash to the 25-day moving average. So there's some sort of a gravitational pull. But the 200-day moving average is a more important one, and right now we're essentially right underneath that on the 10-year treasury. So that's a very important level as well. So all technical aspects, the candlesticks, the Western technicals, you have to kind of have a good background on all of it and put them all together in a confluence of things. They all do get trumped by big news that comes out. So it's quite an artistic way that you have to combine these things and look at it. and create a story that comes from it. And it tends to be quite reliable. Not 100%, nothing is, but it is quite reliable. It amazes me to this day, being a student of this for over 30 years, that these technical signals that we receive are quite reliable, and they do much more often than not give you good accuracy on which way things are going.
How do you? I know this is kind of a odd, maybe an odd. I don't know, Bear. But how do you feel when like mortgage professionals like myself come up to you and just tell you like the impact you or MBS Highway has made in their careers? I mean, I'm sure you get told that a lot, right? And sometimes maybe you get numb to it, but there's got to be some kind of feeling there attached, right?
Never ever get numb to it, Bobby. It's it is. Yeah, I'm at a stage in my life where God's been very good to me. I grew up extraordinarily poor, and I've been blessed and been able to do some things that I didn't even imagine could be possible uh, from a achievement point of view. So I do this now because a passion, because of meaning, and because of the desire to want to do good and to get that type of reaction, let you know you're on the right path. So it's exactly what I hope for. We don't always get it right. Hey, listen, let's face it. I'm the first to admit that you do make a lot of missteps along the way. Won't be the first, won't, but by many times, and it certainly won't be the last either. Last year we thought that in 2023, middle of the year, the rates would come down, and
Hmm.
we made a lot of good calls on rates, and certainly if you look at what we did intra, days and intra months, and looking at the market, we called it accurately. But when we had to make a call as a forecast at the beginning of the year, boy, you really put your neck out on the line.
Hmm. Hmm.
And what we didn't see coming was a lot of the things that caused rates to move higher. And again, it was supply and demand. It was a lot of the excess debt that we had agreed to. There was a deal that was made. I'm not going to get political here, but the Biden
Sure.
administration and Kevin McCarthy made a deal, and they removed the debt ceiling, and they had the $2 trillion. It's almost incredible to how much paper had to be put out there.
Yeah.
Now, this paper not only had to be absorbed by the market, which, anything that's supply and demand, we have a lot more supply that's got to be absorbed. Well, you got to entice people to do it. So there's a higher rate. We didn't see that when we made our forecast in December of 2022 that
Right.
this would happen in June of 2023. So it caught us by surprise, as it did many. But the other thing, too, Fabi, is that the Fed continuing to hike rates kept the normal buyers on the sidelines. I mean, think about it. Let's just say you're managing a lot of money.
Hmm.
Why would you go ahead and buy these treasuries when you knew that the yields on these things would go up because the Fed was going to keep hiking?
Right.
So that would be like saying, "Oh, I want to buy into a CD today," knowing full well that they'd be a better rate in the future. So what did they do? They used this reverse repo facility, and banks put their money in the equivalent of a money market,
Hmm.
knowing that as the Fed hiked rates, which they were anticipating doing, they were going to get a higher and higher and higher return. So this facility hit $2.5 trillion. Now it's been drained. And that's why you've seen rates come down to about 700 billion to 800 billion, in that range. The thing of it is that as that comes back towards zero, the problem that you run into is, where is all the buying going to be coming from these
Hmm.
treasuries? So what we have to hope for is that in the second half of 2024, the big question mark is, will the Fed stop quantitative tightening? Because that's pouring an extra $1.1 trillion of treasuries and mortgage-backed securities on the market. Now, the Fed's not going to buy, it's not going to be quantitative easing, but we want them to slow that down. It's got a multiplier effect. If they slow that down and the Fed's cutting, we should have a good year for interest rates.
Hmm. What do you think, like with the evolution of AI and all this technology that's coming around the high? I mean, we're all into it, right? We're about a year into AI development, and obviously MBS Highway, and I want to keep talking about that a little bit. Is you guys are always kind of bringing some new stuff. Where do you see the evolution of MBS Highway with the new technology? Is there anything coming on the horizon that you can talk about?
We do.
That
We
is,
we we use we use AI. We try to balance things here, because AI doesn't have all the answers and it's relatively new, but we use it certainly, and I think that it's difficult to quantify where it will go. I think it's going to have a very meaningful impact in streamlining and having things evolve more rapidly. There's risks that you run as well. So,
sure.
um, you know, the real answer is, it's difficult to quantify the impact, but the impact will certainly be great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing AI in so many different variations right now. It seems like it becoming almost like a buzzword, like no carbs. Like everything now also has AI infused into it. I can't understand all that, like what happened in 12 months. And AI experts that have evolved out of
Well,
nowhere.
it's difficult for anyone to be considered an AI expert because it's so quick to evolve,
Yeah, yeah.
and it changes so rapidly. I think that a more appropriate would be an AI student. But
Yeah.
people are gonna label themselves whatever they want to label themselves.
So look, Bear, 2023 was a rough year for loan officers. You and I have been in the industry. By the way, just a little side note, January 3rd was 30 years in the industry for me. So 30 years I've survived. I know you've been in a little bit longer, but you know what I mean? 30 is like, that was a heck of a milestone for myself. And I had to think to myself, like 2023 really was a rough year. It was a rough year for loan officers. It was a rough year for the industry. It was a rough year for a lot of people. I mean, where do you see 2024 as far as loan officers in specific, not the market itself, but how loan officers can position themselves to have the right mindset when it comes to like how do you see them engaging the consumer, refinance opportunities, purchase opportunities, that kind of stuff.
So it's a great question. So between us, we've got 66, 67 years of experience here. But most importantly, Fabi, I think it's that we have grown over that experience. It's not like many, unfortunately, people have, they might say they're in the business 10 years, but it might be that same year 10 times. There's a
Mm,
big difference there. So growing and learning, which we both have and share a thirst for, is very critical. I love the question that you asked because when you think about it, 2023 unfortunately saw a lot of people leave the industry, both real estate and mortgage. And the numbers are always gray and hard to quantify, but it does appear that there is a large segment that is left, maybe as much as 50%. Who knows? Maybe more, maybe a little less. I don't know.
mhm,
I just don't have that data. I'm just going anecdotally from what I'm hearing. And there are others that claim that they have the data, but they really don't because there's so many people that are not licensed. The whole banking
mhm,
sector is not licensed, and there's a lot. Um, but there has been a big departure. And of course, listen, we wish well for those people, right? We don't, we don't want to see people struggle out there. We want people to do well. We'd like to see people be prosperous. But what that really means is it's almost kind of like, if you watch Squid Games, congratulations, because you've made it to the next round. So if you survived 2023, you're into 2024, you made it to the next round,
what
you
a good
survived.
analogy.
But you know what that also means, Fabi, that's even much more important than that, is that your competition now is much more stiff.
Mm,
And what this tells us is if you're originating in 2024 and you want to make it to the following round as well, then what you better do is raise your game. And that's
mm,
what this is all about. The days of people throwing deals at you are over. We know that. So now it's a matter of you have to win that customer's trust by being a better resource. You mentioned AI. So do we not think that online would be able to answer questions that, most customers would have by using this?
mhm,
Do we not think that consumers are going to be able to be educated at a higher level themselves? Do we not think that, it is going to become a way to cut costs to a consumer by saying if we don't have to pay a loan officer to handle these things? So these are real questions. So how do we get to the next round? How do we survive in this market? The way to do it is to create more value for your customer. And for me, the way it's always been for me is with knowledge, with education, with really being able to understand and interpret the marketplace. And that's what we try and do every day at MBS How is we try and provide the originator with that ability to create more value because they know what's going on in every real estate market. They know how to quantify the benefits. They know how to show people how to save money on a debt consolidation refinance or move up debt consolidation purchase. They know how to be able to use math to quantify
mm,
why they should not wait for rates to come down and why what marry the home and date the rate is a very cute saying, but we bring the math behind it and the technology and the forecasting behind it to show you the quantifiable benefit of buying the home today and dating the rate, meaning taking the rate out that's higher today and refinancing it in the future, incorporating all those things. Also, bidding over asking price to win the home of your dreams in a
mhm.
competitive market. How many originators out there today, Fabi, have several pre-quals? So here's what happens. The realtor calls and says, oh, they finally found someplace. We've been looking forever. And with the lack of inventory, this was a home that matches what they want. And they're going to go full price. Great. Then they call up later, so they got outbid. An originator would normally say, well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm right here if you need me. That isn't that isn't the originator that's going to be successful. You know what the originator that's going to be successful is going to say? They're going to say, listen, I'm sorry to hear that, but maybe there's a way for them to get the home and win this home of their dreams. Maybe we can show them, first of all, to make sure if it's possible for them to bid more based upon qualifications, which I can do. But what I can also do is show you that because I have appreciation for every market, and we could take a look and see if they bid X amount
Mm.
over to win the home, how long will it take for them to break even? And then where do we look in, let's say, 5 years to see, is this a very profitable situation? If we show them these numbers, maybe they might be willing to bid that much above asking price. They get the home of their dreams, they are profitable, and then you get a transaction instead of losing one. This is what the originator of 2024 needs to be doing
Yeah,
if you want to
yeah.
really excel.
So even though that there's less loan officers, the loan officers who are left are like you're in your
They're
word,
better.
yeah, they're stiffer. There's like you're in the playoffs now. Season's
Right.
over, right? And so now the best whatever number of teams there are now, right? They're playing. So you're not going to get a easy game come Sunday or Saturday.
That's right.
It's a great way to look at it, brother. Love that. Love that. With the market analysis tools that MBH offers, I mean MBS Highway
I
offers,
got you.
sorry. Yeah, yeah.
No problem.
I mean, I know you mentioned that bidding thing, I mean, with analysis stuff.
Bid over ask.
Right. At what point does the customer say, "Hey, listen, I like that, but I really just I can't get it through my head. Like mentally, I know that emotionally, I just can't buy into it because there's emotion, right? Because when you're dealing with consumers, it could make logical sense, but emotionally, it doesn't work. Where could a loan officer like intersect at that point?
So there's a couple of things we have to understand is, it's number one, not everybody's going to be your customer. Okay. So, brings me back to a chapter in my book when I talk about when I learned how to juggle. And when I first learned how to juggle, believe it or not, there's actually juggling instructors, and I actually taught my son. And Dan is like phenomenal juggler.
Wow,
He could do four and over the behind the. He's
nice.
far advanced than me, but Dan's one of those guys that whatever he does extremely well. Um, so when I learned, the instructor says, "Okay, we have to throw them up in a certain way, but then you have to let them fall." I was like, "Why are you teaching me like to let them fall?" He says, and this was a very, very interesting lesson. He said, because no one's going to be perfect and they're going to fall. And if you're
Mm,
panicked over letting them fall, you'll never be a good juggler.
mm, mm, mm.
And it's just like that with deals. See, if you think you need every single deal and you can't acknowledge the fact that some people aren't a good customer, some realtors not a good realtor match for you, some transactions just aren't meant to be, you're going to lose some no matter how good you are. If you can't be at peace with that, if you can't understand that, I'm not saying be a good loser or be satisfied with that,
Mhm,
but there
mhm.
comes a point in time where you have to say, okay, let's move on. I've seen so many people beat themselves up, get themselves in a bad place mentally. So you talked about mindset, right? So what we want to do here is we want to do everything we can do to be prepared to win. Have I become the best loan officer I can be? And this is something you just got to look in the mirror. Do you understand the market? Have you done your reading? Have you done the things to make sure that you are truly an expert and not a salesperson in your marketplace? Do you know what the appreciation levels are? Are you working with the tools and are you an expert in them? Then if you present them correctly, and by the way, are you working on your presentation? Are you standing in front of a freaking mirror and just presenting as if you would?
Wow.
I've done it forever. Listen, I've been presenting professionally for so many years, but ask the people in my office how often we practice. Every single presentation I do, we sharpen it. After every single one I do, and Bobby, there are hundreds and hundreds that I do every year.
Amazing.
Live, I've cut it back down. It's a lot less now, maybe like 30 or 40,
Mhm.
but I do a couple of hundred video presentations, virtual presentations here. After every single one of them, we go back and we look, what could be said better? What could have been done better? Let's make this slide a little bit different to change it. Because remember, I'm changing my presentation and involving it every single
Mhm.
time. What would tell a better story? This is every single time. And I've been doing this since 1992 professionally, where I get paid for it since 1992. So, we're talking about 32 years, and this is still every single time. has to get better.
It's
So,
amazing when I get a chance to talk to people like you and other people in the same realm, that the student is always there. The student is always eager. The student is always open-minded. There is my dad, before he passed at 92, God, by the grace of God, I mean, always said, "I'm always learning every morning."
uh,
Like a week before he passed, Bear, he said to me, "I got a new assistant. Her name is Siri." He had
mm,
figured out how to use Siri on his Apple iPhone that I got him. And
well, being a student is really important, Bobby. That's and being curious,
yeah,
and having the mindset of so mindset. What can I be doing better?
yeah, great. That's
Is
good.
that something that you guys are asking yourself? Is what can I be doing better? Every time you speak to a customer, could I have done that better? Even if you knocked it out of the park, could you do better? Or let's redefine the things that you're doing well and make sure that you can apply them the next time.
I think
So,
sometimes with the mortgage business, we get kind of blinded by their paycheck. For the first time, a lot of loan officers start making good money, right? Let's face it, this business, you can make some really good money in this business at minimal amount of effort. Uh, and they get blinded by that, and then they realize that, I don't need to do what they're talking about. I can just kind of coast on these until they can't coast, and it's 2024.
well, a lot of people did have a wonderful period of time during 2020 and 2021, part of 2022, where transactions were difficult to even keep up with. So things have changed. We know that. And you always go back to the basics. Look, if you're a student and your mindset is in the right place and your work ethic is one of constantly being better and using the right tools, then you will succeed enormously in a great market, but you will also do better than your peers, significantly
Yeah,
better than your peers in the markets that are more challenging, like we saw in 2023. Um, this market is going to be better, but it's going to have more difficult competition. AI is entering the realm as another potential thing to be on the horizon to look out for. So I believe that you need to have all the skill sets and all the tools and be as sharp as possible. And that means practice. I mean, practice, practice, practice.
yeah.
And it's not just practice. Perfect practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So um, the point of the juggling and dropping the balls is that you said, what do you do when the customer just doesn't see it? If you've exhausted that, but you've done a good job, then you be at peace with that. Look, that's fine. If they don't see it, they don't see it. You move on,
Yeah.
and that's all there is to it.
I
You
remember
lose a
one
deal, you move on.
I remember one time you said, "You don't wanna spend 45 minutes learning a new product, but you wanna do my loan. Forget about it."
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And it's so true, right? Like, you wanna do the loan, but you don't wanna learn new techniques. So I
yeah.
think we always have to learn. Always be learning. Maybe that's the motto for
Well, the
2000.
beautiful thing about it is it's not time wasted; it's time invested, and that's the thing that just is a very big thing people have to understand. Is there's ways that you can waste time, and sometimes you want to waste time. Quite honestly, you've got to shut your brain down.
Sure.
Hey, look, at night I'll watch a mindless show. Just really, could I be doing something more productive? I could, but that's okay because that's taking my brain and just shutting it down and
Mhm.
slowing it down. So that's fine. But there are much of the time that you want to spend improving and investing because just think about the leverage you get on that. If
Yeah,
you learn something and you leverage that, then you could use it how many times?
yeah, yeah.
That's the beauty of being a student and learning.
So, Bear, look, I don't wanna get political. I know you don't wanna get political, but we are in an election year cycle. So the election year cycle always has an impact on economics, right? No matter
It
we like it or
does.
not.
It
How do
it
you hmm?
does.
S How do you think the current cycle, the way it's trending, and I'm no prognosticator or anything, right? Ask my wife. Um, but based on what we're seeing right now, is this gonna have an impact on mortgage rates by the end of the year?
Well, if you go right to the Fed, right? So Trump appointed um, Powell, but Powell doesn't like Trump, and Biden wanted Lael Brainerd. So Powell doesn't really have an allegiance towards Biden. And this is kind of the end of Powell's run anyway. He's not up for reappointment. This is one of the reasons we got in trouble in 2021. Powell wanted
Mm,
to be reappointed. He kept rates lower for longer than he should have, created more inflation than than we should have seen. But he did not want to increase rates before the midterm elections came up. I mean, this is how the world,
mhm,
operates here. Okay. So, um, unfortunately, we We are in a situation where politics does play a role, and it really shouldn't. What we see here for 2024 is that a lot's going to depend on where inflation comes in and where the job numbers come in. Just recently, the 19 Fed members thought where the unemployment rate would be, and 12 of the 19 members said that the unemployment rate would be 4.2% or under, between 3.8 and 4.2%.
Hmm.
So that means if the unemployment rate gets to from its current level of 3.7 to 4.2, which I think is very realistic, that means 12 of the 19 Fed members will have to reassess what they had anticipated. And that is why you'll probably get more than 3 Fed rate cuts. You'll probably get more than that in a more rapid fire term the second half of the year. I think the second half of the year should be interesting, and that's when you're going to also start to get the political pressure to say, hey, look, the Fed should not be in a position where they're going to be keeping rates higher than they should be, and stressing the economy, because right now we are very restrictive. It's a little bit complicated how you figure out if the Fed's accommodative or restrictive, but you take the
Mm.
start with the Fed funds rate. So 5.3875 is between the range of 5.25 and 5.5. Then you subtract from that the 3-month expectation for inflation, which it's probably around 3%, but maybe a little bit less than that. So if you take the expectation for inflation and you subtract that from there, then you're about 2.3. And then you have this number that's called like this R star number, around 0.75%. The Fed is restrictive right now by somewhere around 1.5%. So
Mm.
that means the Fed could cut 1.5% and not be accommodative, not be stimulative to the economy. If the Fed cut 1.5%, then that would just be neutral. So right now they are very, very restrictive. And you add to that the quantitative tightening, and we are in a situation where the economy is being forced to slow down. And everybody talks about this soft landing. Look, I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that
Mm.
there's going to be a soft landing. We didn't get a recession theoretically, although we did get the old textbook definition. We
We
had
did.
2 negative
We did.
quarters of GDP.
Yeah.
So you tell me, did we have a recession? Did we not?
If you ask the average man, I think they would say yes. I think the average
And
person on the
and and
street says
and and
yes.
I hate when they say inflation's transitory, then ask the average person that, because let's remember, the inflation rate is slowing, and that's a good thing that the rate of inflation is slowing. But what about the 20% that we've seen? That's already baked in. The slowdown to 3% isn't that it's coming down through, it's 3% above the 20% that you've already
Right.
seen, right?
Right.
So we have seen that, and there's been a lot of blunders by the Fed on that. There's been a lot of blunders politically with all the stimulus that was added. It created all this inflation, and
So
unfortunately, a lot of this stuff does happen for political gain.
yeah. So, but even with the lower rates, the political environment that we're in, the issue that, and I think you and I talked about this last week when we were kind of getting ready for this, was the inventory pressures will remain for housing,
Yeah, the builders aren't building enough homes. You got 2 million
right?
plus households being formed and 1.4 million constructed units. So that's your supply and demand equation. There's too much demand and not enough supply. Now you can delay demand, and you can have, if rates go up, that certainly delays the demand, but it also constricts the supply. If we've seen when people don't move up purchase. So, but remember the thing about I hear this, people say, well, rates come down, then you're going to have people who are locked into their homes from that low rate will now put their home on the market. So prices will come down because there's more inventory. I mean, are they not thinking the next step down the chess? They're playing checkers and not chess, because the next step down the chess match is that seller becomes a buyer. They've got to live someplace. So they're going to have to occupy a unit. They're not going to go, live in a tent someplace, or
Right.
go, so they're going to sell their home and buy another, or at least take up a rental unit, but that's still eating up some of the supply. So
Right.
you're going to see inventory remain to some degree, difficult. It's going to be tight inventory. There may be more activity, but inventory will still be tight, and homes will go quickly if they're priced appropriately. They'll go very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think to that point, I mean, one of the things that we're really pushing hard is this buy now, sell later program, and people can call me and talk to me about it. But I think the buy now, sell later program kind of addresses that, where a seller can buy a house first, and then we give them 6 months with zero interest to sell their house. I think that alleviates some of the pressure, Bear, when some guy says, "I know I can sell my house, I just don't know if I can buy a new one."
That definitely takes the pain of the decision out of the equation, right? So it becomes a no-brainer. And listen, let's understand that the average length of a home on the market, the average is 22 days.
Mm.
Now, what goes into average? What goes into average is you've got a lot of people that are just ridiculous in their pricing and they've got unrealistic price expectations, or people that don't have to sell. They say, oh, I'll put up for a crazy number. And so it sits for 4 or 5 or 6 months. That takes that average and drags it higher. The real average amongst homes that are priced appropriately, if you
Mhm.
take out all that crazy, stuff, it's probably between 2 and 3 weeks,
Wow.
and that's a pretty rapid time for you to sell your home. So I don't think the issue is currently or will be that I'm going to have a tough time selling my home. So long as you put your home on the market appropriately, you
Mhm.
put your home on the
Mhm.
market. And listen, it's going to vary, of course, by area. Markets to markets is going to vary. But if you take an overall picture, you can expect to sell your home relatively quickly if it's priced appropriately. But still, what you're talking about, Bobby, and what you're doing is something that really makes it a no-brainer, because if the average is 22 days and the more normal time is between 2 and 3 weeks, then having that 6 months should give you tremendous peace of mind. Maybe
Absolutely.
what that does is it allows you to be more patient and capture some of the appreciation that is coming down the road, because we are going to see some appreciation, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you think about this. If our forecast is for 5% for the year in 2024, well, that means if you kept your home on the market for even 3 months, it's 1.25% on a
Or even made some, cosmetic changes or some changes to get it back up to price level, whatever the, market level is.
clearly. But even just you said just sitting there for,
Yeah.
let's just say, 3 months, right? So now you're talking about 1.25%, on a $800,000 home. That's an extra $10,000 in your pocket.
Jesus, that's a no-brainer there. Bear, one more thing, and then I'm gonna let you go here. As the rates come down, people are saying that the values of the property could increase, which could then erase the benefit of the rates decreasing. Is there any
No,
merit in
no,
that
no,
statement?
no, no, because the one part of the equation everybody forgets is income. So look, I'm going to give you a very simplistic, because we're going to keep this simple here, right? Let's say in 2021 you had a $1,000 a month mortgage payment because the amount of the mortgage was like 240, and the mortgage rate that you got was, let's say, less than 3%, 2.875, and that gives you roughly, I'm giving you rough numbers here, $1,000 principal and interest, right? Don't hold me to a couple of pennies either way.
Sure.
$1,000 P&I. Your income in 2021 to qualify for $1,000 a month P&I, remember it's just P&I, would be roughly $4,000 a month. Would you agree with that, Bobby? That's
Yeah,
about
yeah.
right, right? So,
Mhm.
so, because we're not counting taxes and insurance, so
Right.
about 4,000 a month P&I. I'm sorry, $1,000 a month P&I, $4,000 a month would be your income, and that's 2.875 for 240. So let's fast forward to 2023, and the end of 2023, you have more expensive real estate. So let's account for that. So instead of a 240 mortgage, you need a 280 mortgage.
Okay.
Okay. And the rate, let's just say at the end of 2023, might have been around 6.75. That's the numbers that I recall to be about right. So that would mean that your monthly payment would go up. Again, I'm going to use round numbers, from 1,000 to $1,800 a month. That's huge. It's $800 a month. That's an 80% increase. And people say, clearly that's affordable. And they're right. Okay. And it's an affordability issue. But that $4,000 a month income in 2021, it doesn't have to also go up at 80%.
Mm.
To
Mm.
offset an $800 a month increase, that's got to go up 20%. Now, according to ADP, between 2021 to 2022, then to 2023, they've already gone up 15%. If you switch jobs, it's already gone up 20%. But what will happen in 2024 is, now maybe prices go up a little bit, maybe rates come down a little bit, but incomes rise. So you can make the mathematical argument that it is somewhat similar to the affordability circumstances that existed in 2021 that will happen sometime in 2024. So the wise person gets ahead of that and looks at the future before it becomes obvious to everybody else, and says, well, if inventory is tight, if affordability is catching up, then where do we think values go? And then you add to the wonderful amount of leverage that you receive. Let's think about one other equation quickly.
Mm.
$500,000 home, 10% down. It's a 450 mortgage. So now you have to make a payment on that. But somewhat similar payment renting. Maybe it might be a little bit cheaper renting initially, but then it catches up. So that's your housing payment that you have to have. But now your investment is $50,000. If that home goes up $5,000, of 5%, forgive me, 5%.
Mhm.
5% on a $500,000 home, that's $25,000
Mhm.
profit on a $50,000 investment. It's a 50% rate of return that you receive.
Yeah.
So if you're wise and you're thinking about it, it's a good time to buy real estate. And listen, I will be full disclosure here. I have purchased 2 more investment properties just in the past couple of months because I see this, and I have been buying. So I believe that this is something that people should be looking at for themselves. And if you believe in it yourself, then it's very easy to convey that message to your customer because you've done the research yourself.
I think most loan officers don't dissect the way you just did. And I want to repeat what you just said: is you bought a $500,000 house, you put 10% down, which is 50,000. It increases 5%, which is 25,000. I mean, so it's not a
It's a
ROI off.
50% return on
Yeah,
investment.
I mean, so your investment was only 50,000. You're making 25,000 off of that. That's incredible, man. I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think loan officers need to be able to share with their clients to get the proper result in 2024.
I
So,
agree.
Bear, I don't want to take up more of your time than we have. You are always so generous to be on the show. I appreciate you more. You know how I said on the telephone anyway. I'm not going to repeat it on air.
Well, much love to you, buddy. And listen, God bless you guys. I appreciate you spending time with us today. And Bobby, thank you for having me on.
All right, brother. Have a good one, okay? I'll talk
Be
to you.
well.
JP, get me out of here, man.